So this week we're talking about social injustice. You know, we want to talk about, its impact in the church or on the church and also in the home. But before we get to that, whenever we think about social injustice, we often think about the ones that are being oppressed. And so my question is, what is oppression and what are the root causes for that?
Well, that's a big question. I think that there is a sense since the beginning of sin, since sin came into the world, there's been a sense of one group trying to force another group to be in compliance with their worldview. We can look as far back as Cain and Abel. Mm-hmm. What happened with Cain and Abel was that because of jealousy and because of maliciousness, mm-hmm. Cain was the first oppressor. He oppressed his brother Abel because he saw the blessings of God on Abel, because Abel was in compliance with God's will. And he did not, the Bible speaks of Cain's countenance falling, mm-hmm. Which means that he didn't receive the approbation, the approval of God, and he saw the approval of God on Abel. And mm-hmm. thus the spirit of jealousy, the spirit of wanting what Abel had, led Cain to take his brother's life. But of course, the idea of oppression is a broad idea with many tentacles. We know that the oppression of the Israelites in Egypt took place because of the Egyptians wanting free labor, wanting to take these people who had multiplied, yes. and utilize them for free labor. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, the Egyptians were also fearful of how much they were multiplied, how fast they were multiplied.
Absolutely.
And did everything they could to mm-hmm. tax them with hard labor even more, with the hopes that the more they oppressed them, the more they would have difficulty in bringing children into the world. But we know what happened. They couldn't stop them because right. the Lord's blessings were upon them, and the more they oppressed them, the more they multiplied. Until, of course, Pharaoh gave the command to kill all the boys, mm-hmm. Which the two midwives found a way to get around to ensure that the boys survived. So we see this idea of wanting what another person has. We see the idea of jealousy. We see the idea of fear of growth, yes. of the nation that is supposed to be the subservient nation. And all that finds root in what scriptures tell us. But I think also the sense of one group feeling superior over another. And that has been translated not only in black and white issues, but in tribal issues. You go to Kenya, you go to the various parts of the world. There are tribal issues many years ago in Bosnia, where one group felt superior to the other group, and thus mm-hmm. felt like they needed to demonstrate that superiority by oppressing the other group. And by oppressing the other group, somehow it made them feel like they were bigger than, like they right. were the masters, right. and they were in charge of the slaves or the lesser, so to speak.
Absolutely. So what's clear from your explanation is that we're not going through anything new.
Right.
There is truly nothing new under the sun. This
That's right.
oppressive nature, this wanting to keep another set of people down so you can now lift yourself up is nothing new. And we know that it's been around from the beginning of time.
Absolutely.
Know that it's normally when the people get up and fight back is when you start to see a change and a breaking. And I think that's the point where we are now. We have seen you in the front lines. We've seen our leadership also marching. But there's always those who push back and say, you know, as Christians, we should not be involved in this fight, right? We should just pray about it. You know, I've been looking at social media. Pastor Bird down in Alabama, he led a rally, and, you know, there were comments like, you know, what type of stunt is this? You know, we shouldn't be marching. This is not going to end until Jesus comes. So pretty much sit back, take it until Jesus comes. What do you say to people who that's their ideology?
Well, if you listen to the sermon I preached earlier, and if people listen to that sermon, it's a sermon that talks about justice, liberty and justice. And there's so many Bible verses that speaks of God being a God of justice, God being a God who stands for the poor, God being a God who expects us to treat the foreigner well. I mean, if you permit me, I can give you just a few verses that I've captured in my notes, just to give people a biblical perspective, because we are between these two polar concepts, the concept of the occupying until he comes, and the concept of his coming. So yeah, we have a responsibility to prepare for the second coming of Christ. But even as we prepare for the second coming of Christ, does that mean then that we ought to be like the proverbial ostrich and stick our heads in the sand and don't address the issues of humanity, the issues of the human condition? Because if the rationale is, what kind of stunt is this? Why are we involved in this? Then why we preach against sin?
Right.
The Lord is coming. Because the first thing we must see is that injustice is sin. And if we preach against sin, we must also address this. You cannot simply say we're going to address the issue of sin, but only the sins as they relate to the 10 Commandments, because the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet, is the essence of what this is all about. When you covet someone, whether you covet their free labor, whether you covet their looks, whether you covet what they have, the essence of what racism and injustice is all about is that I want to take something away from you that God gave you as a human right.
Come on. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
See, so when I take that away from you, it's almost as if I'm stripping you of something God gave you. Furthermore, it also speaks to the issue of idolatry, because if I make myself higher than you, I make myself better than you, I'm in a sense making myself God over you.
I love it. Love it, Pastor.
So you've got to deal with the theology of this. In addition to that, don't ever forget that racism and discrimination always had a religious overtone to it.
Correct.
It is the sense that God made me better than you, which is a lie about God. It is a lie about the character and the nature of God, who made us of all one flesh. We all came from one flesh. So standing up for justice and for equality is standing up for the very values and principles that God himself taught. Don't ever forget this. And let's talk theology now. Let's talk theology. And forgive me because I get a little excited as you
that's
see,
okay. That's
we
okay.
talk about this kind of stuff. You know, I get a little riled up. See, theologically, how do we then explain God telling Moses to go down to Egypt land, tell Pharaoh, let my people go? What is that about? That is God himself establishing a theology of liberation, a theology of setting captives free. And that's why God himself told Israel, when a foreigner comes into your midst, don't treat him poorly because you were once foreigners.
Right.
Jeez, mercy.
So God himself gives the boundaries for how we ought to treat one another, because it speaks, especially if we speak the name of God, it speaks to the character of God that we are demonstrating, the character of God that we are showing the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's very important. That's why also, and I'll say this before I forget, that's why also God established the year of Jubilee, because the year of Jubilee said that if I became enslaved to you because I was indebted to you and couldn't pay the debt, the 50th year, it's a level ground. The land that you took from me, you got to give it back.
Yeah.
If I was enslaved to you, I'm free in the year of Jubilee.
Yeah.
So that's an important concept that speaks to God's establishment of a system of justice and equity where one group would not be so wealthy that they lorded over the poor. And that's why over and over again, God comes back to the idea of justice. And you can ask your question before I share my Bible verses, and because I can go for a minute. But
and I guess you have answered a lot of questions that I have tonight, or today rather. Because one of the things is that I've noticed that this injustice is creating a division inside our church, because here's one set of people that are saying that we should not be involved, but then there are other people that are involved and not only marching but allowing their voice to be heard. Even to the point where, for example, I think it was last Sabbath, some people are saying, it should not have happened on the Sabbath. We should not have gone down to march on the Sabbath. But in my opinion, we are doing something that is right. We are marching for justice. We want the same harmony for Group A, ought to be in Group B. And so we talk about Black Lives Matter, and people are saying that we should not be saying that because all lives matter, which is true. All lives matter. However, the Black lives is the one that are being oppressed. So therefore, we're going to talk about what is being oppressed and bring that to the forefront. If you can't treat Group A in the same manner of which you're treating Group B, then Houston, we have a problem, and we need to talk about that problem. How do you speak at large to the church that we have this undertone division? Some said we should, some said we should not.
Well, let me address the issue that you just raised about people saying all lives matter as opposed to Black Lives Matter. To all the people who say all lives matter, you are not authentic. I want to make that crystal clear. Anybody who says all lives matter, they are inauthentic. And the reason I say that is this. We have seen the system, you who say all lives matter, have seen the system of oppression, and you have done nothing about it as it relates to the all lives matter, or mattering as it relates to the Blacks who have been oppressed. So to all the people who say all lives matter, if you really believe that, what have you done when you have seen Black people oppressed? Because most of the oppression has been against minorities, Blacks, specifically, because Blacks stand out. You can't mistake me for an Indian.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? Or Indians for that matter, the American, the Cherokee. Okay. If you believe all lives matter, for everybody who says all lives matter, what have you done when you've seen minorities oppressed? How have you stood up for them? Because if you have not stood up for them, then you genuinely don't believe all lives matter.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think
if you believe that, then we wouldn't have to say Black Lives Matter. We wouldn't have to ever say that.
Right.
Well, I think part of the problem is that a lot of the folks who say all lives matter do not even acknowledge that there's oppression. They do not acknowledge that there's social injustice. I've seen so many posts that say, if people would just obey the police, then this would not happen. It's like they have blinders on. It's like they're not seeing the same things that we are seeing. What I'm noticing is we are becoming more and more just divided as a human race. you're either on one side or another. In every topic, you can just tell where someone is going to land.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting to see this back and forth about all lives matter and Black lives matter, because the people who say all lives matter do not even see any injustices. In their mind, we're like making this up. We're using the race card. They use the fact that Barack Obama was president. You know, if there's so much injustice against Black lives, how did he become president? And it's like, what does that one act have to do with the systemic and historical oppression, injustice, unfair treatment that we have been going through for so many, many years?
Yeah, and you raise a powerful issue, Sis Smith, because it's people use Barack Obama's election as a litmus test for racism in America. So Barack Obama was elected president, therefore there is no more racism.
Right.
And what we don't get is that the backlash, one of the reasons Trump was elected was because Barack Obama was elected. So what we have now is a backlash to Barack Obama's election. What we have is a backlash. The Tea Party, that's a backlash to Barack Obama's election. That's why they had the effigies of Barack Obama as a monkey or with a noose around his neck. These people marching as Tea Party members. If you remember those depictions, those horrible depictions.
Yes.
And the birth of controversy that the present president raised, that Barack Obama was somehow not a U.S. citizen. So what we are seeing is almost like, okay, people, there's been an awakening of evil that said, one Negro got elected president, it'll never happen again over my dead body. That's what we're seeing now.
That's absolutely.
Is that folks are coming out of the woodwork. Those who didn't like Obama, because here's the truth. There's always been a middle of the road group of Caucasian Americans. There are good white people. Don't ever think there are many great white people. Matter of fact, we're seeing that on television right now.
Yeah.
In many places, 80% of the crowd are white young people right now marching for George Floyd. Okay, so during the Civil War, white people fought during the Civil War to free the slaves. Okay, so keep that in mind. White people were part of the Underground Railroad. The only way the Underground Railroad was successful was because there were Christian people who believed in exactly what the Bible said about God's creation, that we're all human beings, red, yellow, black, and white. And they stood and they protested. They sent their sons to die so that blacks could be free. And I think what we're seeing now is almost like a rebirth of that, almost like a rebirth of the civil rights movement. And my prayer is that it will not be short-lived, but it'll be so long and so protracted that the change is bound to happen. So I want us to be clear that there are many great white people out there, but there is an underbelly. There's a red underbelly in America that is always representative of a level of resentment that the Confederacy lost. And they're still fighting today for the restoration of the Confederacy. They want America to be great again. How was America great? When Negroes
stayed in their place.
Knew their place. When you knew your place, when I talk to you, you say, yes, sir. And going to Alabama, I went to school in Alabama back in the 80s. And you knew how to say, yes, sir. Yes, sir. When the police pull you over, yes, sir. Yes, officer, sir. Yes, sir. You got to put that sir there.
Yes.
Wow.
That kept me alive, by the way.
Pastor, a lot of people may be watching us this afternoon and saying, what does this have to do with family life? I thought family life was about family and family dynamics. Well, I'm here to say that this has everything to do with family life, simply because before it affects the church, it affects the family, and the family dynamics. So it brings me to my next question. What should a conversation look like between me and my children, us and our children, about the social injustice that is going on and how they should conduct themselves once they walk out of our doors?
I think that's a very, very important question, a practical question. And so it's important. When I was going to school at Oakwood, I was a literature evangelist. You're going to knock on doors, and most of the doors you're knocking on are white people's doors. Most of the people you're approaching are white people in Alabama in 1980, 1981. Now, I'm seeing people drive with their gun in the back of the pickup truck. You understand? So they drive down the pickup truck, the rifle is right here behind their heads. So you knew how to say, yes, sir. You knew how to say, yes, sir.
Right.
And the key is to teach our children, number one, to de-escalate a matter. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, officer. Just get home, kid. Kid, you got to tell your kids, I want you to come home. So while you can argue with me as your parent, don't argue with the police. Yes, sir. No, sir. Keep your voice low. Breathe. If you feel your heart racing, breathe slowly.
Yeah.
Calm down. Maintain a positive posture, a low-key posture. Kids, I want you to come home in one piece. If the police say, I'm going to arrest you, you say, yes, sir. Don't get in an argument with them. Do your endeavor best. Now, what we're saying is this, because we all saw the guy down in Florida who was attending to the guy with a mental illness, and he was laying on the ground. The cop said, "Put up your hand." He laid on the ground with his hand up in the air like this, and he still got shot. And he was in uniform. You remember you saw that year before last?
Yep.
Yeah.
Blew your mind. You wonder, his hand is up, and he still got shot. He's on his back. Okay. George Floyd had handcuffs on, and he still got strangled to death. But what we're saying is, do everything you can to increase your chances of coming home.
Yeah.
We can deal with this tomorrow. We can call the NAACP tomorrow. We can call Al Sharpton tomorrow. We can call whoever we need to call. We need to get a lawyer. We need to call the conference firm. We can do that tomorrow. You get home tonight. Your job is to just get home. Put your hands on the steering wheel. Put your hands out the window. Officer, my hands are out the window, sir. What do you need me to do? How do you want me to do that, sir? Okay. Okay. So, it's what we all call the talk, right?
Yeah.
And it's important. We're talking about life and death. And we're saying we just want to increase your chances of getting home, because you still don't have any guarantees. One thing is for sure. If you badmouth the cop, okay, anything is likely to happen. Okay?
Yeah.
Even with the body cam that they have, somehow or another, they're turning off body cams.
Yes.
Okay. Somehow or another, the state trooper's car didn't show that angle.
Yes.
Put a camera outside his car.
Yeah.
On both sides. Camera in the door. So that you can see all the way around.
All angles. Yep.
Yeah. So that's the key I tell my young people. We just want you to get home, kid. We love you. We don't want you hurt. And let me tell you this. I've been racially profiled. I mentioned this last week. Coming through Florence, South Carolina at 1 o'clock in the morning, heading to my mother-in-law's house in Marion, South Carolina. The cop is sitting right here. I pass him. I'm driving perfectly slow. I don't have all my lights are working. I'm put my signal on and turn. He comes out right behind me. And he chooses to run my plates.
Hmm.
A black man driving a BMW.
Mm-hmm.
And when I drove past him, I said, this guy's gonna pull me over.
Mm-hmm.
This
You always
cop is
know.
gonna pull me over. He pulls out and he drives behind me for about 4 or 5 minutes, just behind me. Everybody else is passing me. He wants the Negro. He wants that Negro.
Mm.
So when he pulls me over, I said, I go into my my pastoral conversational role. Hello, good evening, officer. How are you today? My first instinct was to be peeved.
Right.
First instinct was to be angry because I know I'm being profiled.
Right. Right.
But I don't give in to that instinct. I do the opposite. Don't get angry, young people. Be as positive, as confident, and as pleasant as possible. God bless you, officer. How are you today? You guys, man, we just love you guys. You guys do a great job. That's the kind of, because what you're trying to do, you're trying to disarm the officer.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Right.
You understand what I'm saying? You're trying to disarm him. You're trying to make yourself seem as non-threatening as possible. And if you're a Christian, you talk to him about the Lord.
Right.
If you believe in Jesus, you tell him, I'm glad the Lord saved me. We're just thankful that God has you out here to help keep us safe in the name of Jesus. You understand what I'm saying? So, so do everything you can to create a different aura, and don't allow yourself to be agitated, to be angry, to get upset, even though you know you're being picked on. When you get home, you sit down, you write a complaint.
Let me ask you, Pastor, do you think that we have choices between fairness and justice?
Oh my God. Well, I'll tell you this. We all want to be treated fairly. And if you're treated fairly, you can say, you know what, that's just. For instance, if you get pulled over because you were speeding, what you gonna say? You're speeding. You know what the speedometer says.
Right.
Speed limit says 65. You're going 75. So if you get a ticket, you're treated fairly. And if you're treated fairly in that way, you're treated justly. Here's what I say. The answer to that question is, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Liberty and justice for all. Treat me with the same level of respect that you treat everybody else. I'm not necessarily asking for any favors.
Right.
I'm asking for equity.
Yes, equity.
That's good. That's good, Pastor. That's good.
Yeah, very good point. So I want to take us back to the young people again for a minute. You mentioned earlier that 80% of those marching are Caucasian young people. And there seems to be a huge percentage of young people who are coordinating the protests. They're out there protesting. Our young people want to protest as well. They want to get out. They want to march. What do we say to our young people to not discourage them from participating in the fight? We've had some conversations from parents. I'm afraid for them to go out there and march. What do I do? We're getting into arguments because they want to go. Parents don't want them to go. And so it's causing conflict within the home because you have the generations who have different reactions and responses to what is happening. How do we educate our young people? The young people of our church, our own children, grandchildren who want to march. How do we educate them so they do it in a manner that's safe, and they make it home, right? They make it home too, just like the person who stopped by a cop. We want them to make it home from these marches. So how do we educate them, equip them, not discourage them from the fight, but still go out there and make it home safely?
So my question in response to your question is that why are we not going with them as parents?
Mercy.
I wouldn't understand. I don't even understand that.
Right.
It should be, let's go together as a family.
Yes.
For this is a just cause. It should be us as parents showing them the lead in what it means to stand for principle, to show them by our example that we believe in this issue. And in fact, to let them know that we are fighting for them.
Right.
They must know that we're fighting so that they can have a better opportunity than we did, a better future than we did. That is the line of history that has come down through the years. Our forefathers fought for our freedom.
Yes.
We need to be fighting for the freedom of this generation and for the freedom of the next generation. And I would even add this, Sister Smith, I would even add this. The thing that is most frightening to me when I'm out there is that by and large, the church is absent. The number one, the evangelical church is nowhere to be found because they have a different definition of what justice is.
Yeah.
So the thing I want people to understand is that you cannot separate justice from righteousness. Righteousness and justice in Scripture are indelibly intertwined. You cannot tell me that you're righteous in one area but unjust in another area.
Come on.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can I give you a Bible verse? Just
of course.
Sure.
Because I want you to know, I don't want to be just, throwing stuff off the top of my head. All right? Because I was just looking at this verse today, and it struck me. This is what Ecclesiastes 5 verse. I'm going to give you a couple, if you don't mind. Proverbs 21:3, the Bible says, to do justice and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. Hold on. Get that. Proverbs 21:3. To do justly and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. What does that mean?
Mercy.
Wow.
What is sacrifice? We understand sacrifice in the Old Testament to mean worship. So you bring your sacrifice as a sign of your worship, your allegiance to God. Proverbs says justice and judgment are more important than worship.
Wow.
I tell people, you deal with that. Proverbs 21 verse 3. To do justice and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. I read that verse and I'm like, oh God, really?
Wow.
Mercy.
So for the people who say to me, Pastor, you shouldn't be out there on the Sabbath, you need to read this verse. Explain this verse to me. Should I come to church on the Sabbath and act like everything is okay and keep the Sabbath holy, quote unquote, while injustice runs amok? What does the Lord require? You want to know what God requires? You don't want to know what God requires, because I can give you the Bible verse. I can give you verse. You understand what I'm saying? Micah 6 verse 8. He had shown you, oh man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, to act justly.
Yes.
That is to pursue justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. In other words, what the text is saying, you cannot walk humbly with God without acting justly and having mercy. So for people who think that I can walk with God and ignore injustice and ignore mercy, you've missed God altogether.
There's so much mischaracterization of Jesus. That's what I'm seeing on social media.
Yeah.
So much mischaracterization of our Lord and Savior. Like, we know that he's gentle. We know that he's meek. We know that he's mild. We know that he's kind. But he's also a righteous judge. You know,
That's right.
Also, he despises evil. You know, he wants to put enmity between him and sin. Like you said, if we don't see social injustice and unfair police practices as sin, because that's what, you know, the pushback is, hey, we can't march against police brutality because that's not what it's about. It's all about sin. Well, how can police brutality not be a sin? So if we're worried about sin, why aren't we worried about police brutality? Why aren't we worried about murder? The fact that you can kneel on someone's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and see nothing wrong with it. We're missing the mark here. We're missing the mark. How do we not see that as a sin? And it's all the implicit biases. It's the ingrained prejudices that we hold, that when I look at you and I see your brown skin, I don't see you as fully deserving as I see someone of the paler hue. And I mean, we have to call this thing out for what it is. We cannot sugarcoat it. The reason why you don't see it as an injustice is because you don't think George Floyd is worth the fight. We're saying George Floyd is worth the fight. If it was my son, he would be worth the fight.
Absolutely.
So we have to get to a place where injustice for one person hurts us the way that it hurts God.
Absolutely. You've articulated that so clearly, sis. You know, a part of the conversation that I've been involved in is with people saying, you know, why is it that we don't march like this with black on black crime? And I personalize that because my brother was shot by 3 young black men. My brother was shot and killed in Philadelphia by 3 young black men. But here's the distinction. I remind people that the 3 black young men, they were caught and they went to jail and served their time. Okay? The police kills George Floyd, and if nobody had videotaped it, they'd be walking scot-free. And this happens over and over and over and over again. Is that, yeah, there's always the potential for the black person who shot another black person to be caught and go to jail. What's happening is that police are killing people with impunity.
Yes.
With no, and in this age of technology, when everybody has a video camera, the police are acting as if they are unfazed.
Yes. Yep.
A guy running away from you and you shoot him in the back.
Yep.
You're unfazed. Over and over again. Unfazed. The behavior is not being altered because they don't fear reprisal. They don't fear being caught. The consequences are not sufficient enough. And let me back up and say this. When I passed the Miracle Temple, I had 7 police officers in my church. I've been to the barracks at in Pikesville in Maryland for my troopers who were great guys. Loved them to death. But you know what's funny? Here's what's funny. One of my troopers retired. And he's driving in his town one day, a retired state trooper who ran a barracks for Maryland state trooper. And he gets pulled over by a white cop and harassed. And he says he let the cop finish. And then he shows him his badge and then walks the cop through the things that he should have done. But this happens over and over and over again. So, and here's the other thing I say to people who say, well, you know, why is it that we don't protest like that when blacks get shot? Here it is, ladies and gentlemen. This is the one. I want you to write this down. Police officers represent justice. Police officers represent the law.
Mm-hmm.
When the law acts lawlessly, what happens to justice?
Come on, sir. You're preaching. You're preaching today, sir. Come on. Come on.
That is the issue that sails or Pookie and Ray and them over in New Orleans. Crazier than a bug in a rug, right? They are gangsters. They're Bloods and Crips, and they do what they do. Right? What they do is illicit, illegal, immoral, and they should be caught and punished for the crimes that they commit. Let's be clear about that. But the issue is, and the systems and the structures that are in place that create Pookie and Ray, that's another discussion for another day.
Another discussion, right? Yes.
Okay, but at the end of the day, I'm saying police officers should be first peace officers. Individuals who are responsible for de-escalation
at all times,
for acting moderately, for acting with wisdom, for acting, use of force should be the last resort. And what I see over and over again on these videos, it's the first resort. It is I'm the cop, you do what I say, sit down. We see the 72-year-old man that was slammed on the ground, back of his head, bust wide open, bleeding on the ground, and the cops almost like step over him. Not one person stopped to help a 70-something-year-old man that y'all pushed down on the ground. He's bleeding out, could have died, and nobody stops to help him. Really? Is that what policing is?
Mercy.
So I'm saying that being peace officers, looking for a way to save lives rather than take lives, looking for a way to help rather than hurt, looking for a way. It's like England. In England, the cops don't even have guns, most of them. They're called bobbies. They walk around with a stick because they understand we got to de-escalate lest we get jumped. See, and American cops will say, well, we have a great system. Our system is probably the worst in the developed world. It is the worst in the developed. You do the math in terms of incarceration, level of violence. Why? Why is it that police officers kill so many people in America? Why? It's not happening that way in France, not that way in Spain, not that way in England, not that way in Germany. Why is it this way in America? Why is it that there are so many Black people incarcerated in America? If the system we had was working even in the slightest proportions, we would not have the results that we have today. Mass incarceration, primarily of minorities, police shooting people and killing people willy-nilly. The system we have is absolutely 100% broken and needs to be revisited.
Well, I've heard it say that the system is not broken. It's working exactly the way it was intended to work, which is not for us. And so we need to dismantle that thing, which leads me, I don't know if you have more questions, Babe, but my final question.
I just have, before you get to your final question, I just have one question, Pastor. How do you answer a person that asks the question, can march or literature serves as a vehicle for social changes? Can it really serve as a vehicle for social changes?
Can
marches or handing out literature?
Right.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how do you think we got to where we are? Remember, Black people couldn't vote in the 60s.
Right.
Black people in America, you couldn't even vote. So the voting rights bill had to be passed. And how was it passed? Because people protested. People marched. Black people and white people stood together, arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder. Jews were there, shoulder to shoulder, crying for justice and fairness. Okay. Listen, we've got to understand, and I don't want to act as if we haven't made progress, because when you look back at where African Americans have come from slavery to where we are now, Many steps have been taken to bring us to this point.
Right.
We are making progress, but the fear I have is that sometimes it seems as if you take 2 steps forward and 3 steps backward.
Right, right.
And that's the problem. The system as presently constructed. I don't know, I sent this thing out. Somebody sent me this thing of these police officers, these minority police officers who were talking about how they were trained and what they were told when they went out. And they were told, you got to come back with something today.
Wow.
Coming the end of the month, you ain't arrested nobody. And so you need to go to the black neighborhood. You need to go to the Hispanic neighborhood. Somebody's doing something. And so they go and arrest poor people and find somebody to lock up. So the system tells police officers, you need to find somebody to lock up. Because if you're not arresting people, you're not doing your job. And that's the
Wow.
So, baby, have your final question?
Yeah. So my final question is, after the marches have stopped, then what?
Well, I think the question is, what progress has been made since the marches began? You see Congress, Democrats and Republicans, now on Capitol Hill, passing laws that will outlaw certain police practices.
Right.
So we see that happening, which is a major step. Okay. Now, we need to continue marching because police academies and police stations need to run and operate differently. I was reading something this morning about what happened in Camden, New Jersey. And they were comparing it to what potentially could happen in Minneapolis. And they were saying that Camden defunded the police something like 10 years ago. I forgot the exact date. But they defunded their police department because the police department was so corrupt, it was beyond repair.
Wow.
And so the article went on to show that all the police officers were fired. And then they rehired several, and they established a different paradigm. So now in Camden, police officers are doing barbecues in the community.
Wow.
So you see a cop, he's playing basketball with the kids. So instead of being a police officer, they're really peace officers. They are there to keep the peace. They are there to get to know the community. They are there to get to know people's names. And what it showed was that violent crimes and crimes in general in Camden, after this change in the police department and how policing was done, after the police department was defunded in Camden, crime dropped by 42%.
Wow.
Crime decreased by 42%. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's amazing. What a new way to see policing. What a new way to approach policing. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, new things can be done. New ways of policing ought to be initiated. New ways of training police officers must be instituted. Racial profiling must be eliminated. Asking police officers to fulfill some kind of unspoken or spoken quota in terms of tickets and arrests, where in essence they're going to harass people, that needs to cease and desist. So the underbelly of policing needs to shift.
Yes. Yes. And we can only do that if we continue to put pressure on our lawmakers.
Right.
We have to put pressure on them.
There you go.
You know, some of us have to get into some of these political spaces. You know, we have to, you know, get close to our congressmen and our mayors and our, you know, show up for town hall meetings. We have to become part of the system of change. We cannot just stay silent anymore. We have to become involved. You know, I understand the separation of church and state. I get that. But we live in these states, you know, we live in these states, and we want our children to come home safe. I want that if my son is stopped for whatever reason, that he's not going to be mishandled, you know, that he's not going to come back to me in a body bag, or, you know, on life support, or bones broken all over his body. And so we have to speak up. We can't stop putting pressure on our lawmakers. If it takes marching every day, then that's what we need to do. Yeah. Like I was sharing with my husband the other day, any type of progress that we have made have come after movements just like this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so we cannot let up. We can't let up now. There's too much at stake. There's too much at stake. So, you know, I want you, I see our hour is almost up, but I want you to really talk to those who are listening right now. I know we've mentioned it several times throughout this broadcast, but talk to them about the fact that you cannot profess to be a Christian and a follower of Christ if you're not pursuing justice and mercy. I think they need to hear that one more time before we wrap this up.
I'm going to give you two things, again, back to the Bible, because I don't want to just give you my opinion. Jesus says, Luke chapter 4, verse 18, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He had sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, the recovery of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty those who are oppressed.
Yes. Wow.
That's the ministry of Jesus, folk.
How can it be any plainer than that?
Right. So I'll give you one more from scripture to show you what Jesus felt about oppression. When Jesus came into the temple court and he saw people being taken advantage of, people being oppressed, people being ripped off, he flipped over the money changers, he knotted the whip together, and he drove out those who bought and sold. Do we know what that was about? Jesus says, you've turned my house, which should be a house of prayer, into a den of thieves. Yeah. That was about oppression. How was oppression evident? What would happen is that in the temple court, let's say you were a poor person, you came with your one little sheep, you raised your sheep, you came to the temple court to offer your little lamb as a sacrifice. And when you came, the priest who inspected your lamb said, you know what, I see a little black spot here, which means your lamb is not acceptable as a sacrifice. What I want you to do, I want you to go see Bucky over there. Bucky's going to give you an acceptable lamb. Except when you went to Bucky, instead of paying $1 or 50 cents, which is what you did when you raised your lamb, Bucky says, well, you're here now and it's $20 for the lamb. Right. It was a scheme. It was a sham. And Jesus flipped over the money changers because people were being taken advantage of. People were being oppressed. People were being hoodwinked. People were treated unfairly and unjustly. And it made Jesus angry. Yeah. Read Ellen White. It was righteous indignation. Come on. It was righteous indignation. Yes. He was angry that this was being done in the name of his Father. It was disrespectful. It was dishonorable. It was unjust. It was evil. It was maniacal and malevolent. Come on. And so, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, we as the church today, if there's anybody who should be standing for justice, it should be the church. You cannot for 1 minute question where Jesus would be today. If you wonder where Jesus would be today, you haven't read Jesus. You haven't read your Bible. Jesus would be where the people are today. Jesus would be in the crowd calling. Jesus, no doubt in my mind, would be leading the charge for justice today. Wow. Wow. And when we as a church remain silent, when we have a hands-off approach, I believe unequivocally that we misrepresent Jesus. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
My determination by God's grace is in this matter. I may falter here and there, but in this matter, I wasn't back in 1960, 1959. I wasn't in Birmingham. I wasn't even born yet. But in this matter, in this season, I will do my part by God's grace to cry out, to lift up my voice like a trumpet, and to call for righteousness, for equity, for justice, that they all might flow down like mighty rivers and like rushing waters in our nation today.
Yes, sir.
Beautiful,
yes, sir.
beautiful.
Yes, sir.
Pastor, we thank you so much for your time. We are so proud to be part of your congregation and to see you out there, you know, marching for justice, speaking up. People have asked, you know, where's the preacher? And, you know, there you are, being a voice, you know, and I must say, I'm a Jersey girl, Newark, Brick City all the way, and I am so proud of Jersey. Yes. So proud of Jersey. We have had multiple demonstrations and marches, and for the most part, everything has been peaceful. And I'm just so proud, and I pray that it continues that way. So may God bless you as you continue to do what he has called you to do. Thank you for being an example of leadership. I know our young people look to you, and we're just grateful and we're thankful for you. And so, folks, we have come to the end of the hour. Once again, we thank you so much for joining us, spending your 3 o'clock hour with us. And don't forget, we want to hear from you. We love to hear from you. So you can email us, family@cotosda.org. We read your questions live before we start our sessions. We didn't have any questions this week, but we did get all of your comments. So continue to reach out. Make sure you're commenting, you're liking the video, and you're sharing it so that others can be blessed and hear the word of the Lord as well.
And for those who need more information on family life or any information as it relates to Koto Seventh-day Adventist Church, just go to our website, kotosda.org, and you will get all the information you're looking for.
Yes, make sure you're following us. We got some good stuff going on here at Koto. But again, thank you for joining us. We love you. God bless you. And
God bless you.
See you next week.